Now is the time to live life inspired. You're listening to Carey Pena Reports. Hi, everyone. I'm Carey Pena, and thank you so much for joining us for our podcast, Carey Pena Reports. I am in studio now with a gentleman who I've come to know, a friend of mine, Frantz Beasley. We are producing a podcast for you called Redemption, and I wanted to introduce you to my audience. Welcome back to the studio.
Oh, thank you, Carey, for having me.
So Frantz served 14 and a half years in prison. And your story is incredibly dramatic, but it is also incredibly inspirational. These are the interviews I do on my podcast. I focus on people who inspire. We wanted to tell the stories about how you turned your life around and how you go out and help others do the same. Before we get into that, though, can you introduce yourself to the audience and tell them a little bit about what landed you behind bars?
Yeah, well, my name is Frantz Beasley, and I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, one of the 6 people actually from the state. Ultimately, it's a long story, but it's short. I mean, I come from abuse. I come from, I guess, domestic violence, all those things that just, life was out of control very early on, is what I'll say. And because, I won't say because of that, I never like to make excuses for bad behavior. I always take responsibility for my actions, especially those type of actions. But I made all the wrong decisions, to be completely upfront, and went to prison twice in my life behind those terrible decisions I was making. And if it wasn't for literally the grace of God on my life and a million different examples that change is possible. I've seen it over and over and over again in the lives of other people, and also people investing in me to take time to actually show me that there's another way to live life. And to be completely upfront, I went with it. I've fallen so many different paths, wrong paths in my life, and at some point, when I shifted, when my mind began to transform, I realized maybe I could start following other people's examples, and those examples led me to where I am at today. I also learned that in my own life, transformation and redemption takes place. It's not an individual thing. It really does take a community. It takes support. It takes mentoring. It takes 1,000 bad decisions more, and still people alongside you to help you along the way and let you know that we can do this. And so, yeah, for me, I've just been a person that's been extremely blessed and fortunate to have an unbelievable support system. Even today, sitting here with you, it's this constant support that has come into my life. People believing in me, and if they can believe in me, then I just at some point said, well, maybe I should start believing in myself and this new individual that I could be. And so, yeah, my life is from prison to praise is what I call it. I live a life today of just being joyful, being trying to give as much as I can, and to hopefully inspire other people to also understand that their lives aren't over with, and that I just know that from a firsthand experience that if I could turn my life around, anybody can. It is not over with, that you can turn things around. And if there's anything that my life can ever offer to anybody, I think that's the message. It's not over. It's never over. As my dad would say so poetically, until that first shovel hits you in the face, it's never over until you always have an opportunity to help someone else along the way. So.
Frantz, I'm going to have you share the story of the day that your life really changed. That was September 11th, when you were sitting in prison. We're going to share that with the audience in just a moment, but I wanted to tell you about this church service that I attended online over the weekend, Scottsdale Bible. And the subject of the sermon was all about shame, and how in our lives, when we make mistakes, a lot of times the shame that comes with those mistakes holds us back because we don't think that we are worthy of praise or love. Or if you're a faithful person, if you're a religious person, you could translate that to God's love, as the pastor said. How do you respond to that? Because I'm sure that a lot of the mistakes you've made, and you were very honest at the podcast series that we're shooting with you, is very raw and very real. You were totally honest about the things you've done, and some of them were not pretty. They were not pretty. Yeah. That shame, did that weigh very heavy on your heart? And how do you go about walking past that?
Yeah, absolutely. Shame, it's strange. Shame did not enter into my thought process until into my heart, literally spirit, until I wanted to change and do better. As long as I was living this riotous, out of control lifestyle, this lifestyle of a gangster, as long as I was living that, I was fine. It was just part of the image. It didn't matter. It's
so
like,
you didn't have guilt or shame during that period
at all. It's just because it goes along with it. And you're so busy. It's so ego driven, living that type of lifestyle of an outlaw. It's almost like you're untouchable. And of course, until you get caught, and then of course you're not so untouchable. But the reality is that was the last thing on my mind. Shame didn't creep in really until I felt while I was sitting in prison that I felt like I could change things. I knew in my life things could begin to turn. But what would people think of me? This is not your first time in, it's your second time. And this time you're going to be walking out of this prison system. You'll be 35 years old walking out. You're not a kid anymore. You got to, you're just looking at your children grow up out here. You're thinking about all the wrong you've done. It's not just what you're doing to just random people in society and harming those folks. Because I used to be a very violent person. So, thinking about all those demons you have to deal with, and not to mention just looking at your mother getting older, you're looking at family members dying off. I mean, it's a long time, over 14 and a half years. And so you start to take all that into consideration, and you start asking yourself, are you worthy of really forgiveness? Do you think do you think people would really want to accept you back in? And it does. It's overwhelming. I thought about it over and over again. It was probably one of the key parts to my prayer life while I was in prison. I remember writing it once in a class. I remember writing that I oftentimes fear that society won't accept me. It's my second time in. It's, just the type of crimes I was committing and the level of violence and so forth. There's a lot to carry. And I remember this lady, Miss Rogers, I never forgot her. She responded back on the paper. She says, how would they know you were a criminal, or if you were ever in prison, or if you were ever had a felony conviction, unless you were acting that way when you got out? And for some reason, it just made sense to me that moving forward, that it's just about how you live now moving forward, is that I can't change the past. That's all she was saying in those very simplistic words. There's nothing you can do about it. As many apologies, like, what do you want, a pint of blood? I'll give it to you, but it doesn't change anything. I can't undo something when you do something. You do wrong, it's done. When you do right, it's done. Whatever you do in life, whatever you let out, I can't take it back. And that's the thing that I came to realize, that I had to come to the conclusion that, how about you accept the reality in front of you, that it's a done act. You've committed those crimes, you've harmed people. Now, what do you do moving forward? And that's where all my power was at. And I realized that the only way you can combat shame is by doing something about it. You can't sit there and just wallow in it, and because that's just another prison cell. You have to do something, actively get involved, and love is a verb. That's what I realized. I heard that song over, and love is a verb. Well, then get up and do something. Be active with it. You feel bad about your past, then why don't we go ahead and start paying it forward every day of your life? Let's go ahead and let's impact one. I can't tell you how many people I've harmed in my life, but I can tell you, now today, I can't tell you how many people I've helped. And that makes me feel good. It's not that it's not a wins and losses. It's not a good and bad. I'm not trying to tally it. I'm just saying that my life now, I can pour it out a different way. And I won't say that I don't have remorse and I don't have tons of regret. I won't say, but I do something with that shame when it begins to creep in, because I will not lie. There are times in my life where I do get down. You think about, wow, you really did some of those things. And it is hard but you have to remember, you have to get up now, Frantz. We got to get to life, and we got to get to living. There's a whole world out there you can help, and you can make things better out there. Not making up for the past, accepting the past for what it is, and now, I guess, facing the light of what life is and what you can make it for other people.
Do you think part of this process for you was really being honest with yourself and accepting the things that you had done? Because a lot of times when we make mistakes, it's hard for us to accept it ourselves, and let alone going a step farther. You put it out there. You are publicly blogging about your story. And that was how I found you, in fact, that I was following along with you on Facebook. And I tend to really read people's Facebook posts. I'm one of those rare souls that actually reads. And I'm an empath. So when I see something, it really strikes me. And I started following along with your posts, and two things hit me. One, there's a real honesty in your writing, and you actually have very sophisticated writing. And you've told me now that it's from all the time you spent behind bars, studying, learning, reading. You read how many books?
It was over 1,000.
Over 1,000 books. So you have a very sophisticated way of writing, and it's honest. And also how much you care about helping others without judgment. And that's how we came to this show, Redemption. Even though you have committed crimes, and why don't you outline for the audience so they understand sort of what they're dealing with here with you? You did like armed robberies, drug crimes, kind of outline.
So I had two. What I've been convicted of is 2 armed robberies and a kidnapping. And the kidnapping, for instance, when you kidnap someone, for those that don't know, it's you move them against their will. And that if you rob a Jack in a Box, for instance, I hope I'm not giving them free advertising, but if I rob at McDonald's, whatever, if I take the crew and I put them in a cooler until I leave, and take all the money and then I leave, I kidnap them. I move them from point A to point B against their will. So kidnapping, for instance, in my case, kidnapping was a man coming out of his own trunk. Of his vehicle. As I said, is extremely violent stuff that was going on in my life. Because what I do, as far as what I used to do, as far as we call it jacking in the street, but armed robbery it's just that. It's you dragging you're robbing a lot of drug dealers. You see an establishment, you see an opportunity, you take it. It's every day is you're looking for that next opportunity until you hit something big. Then you don't have to look for it every day, and then you're looking for your next. It's almost, I don't know. I feel like I used to feel like a shark in the water. You're just always looking for that next bite. You're always looking for that. And anybody can be a means to an end. It's an extremely violent world that that's what I chose to be involved in.
And tell us about that day when things turned around for you. Really turned around. Yeah,
that was September 11th, 2001. It was the one day I was still 2001 was a powerful year for me. It just was, but September 11th was different because that day I was still a criminal. In my mentality, I was still a gangster. I was still an outlaw, and I enjoyed that lifestyle. At that point I was just making plans to be better than what I was last time I got out. That was really it. It's and it was a very egotistical type of way of living life, but that's what I was. That was the mentality. And I don't, and I hope I'm not following a rabbit trail when I do this, but I feel like oftentimes I speak on this, and people always try to stop me from sharing this truth about myself. But when I share from a perspective of someone who enjoyed crime. This is how I make a living.
No shame and no guilt.
And no guilt. It's just, this is how I do things. And I don't, sometimes, Frantz, sociologically, this is what was going on, or you come from this background. No, I've always known exactly what I was doing. It's not like I couldn't have went to college and went and did this, or, went a different route. I could have done a billion different things. I chose this route. And it's hard for people sometimes to accept that about me, that I'm truthful about that. And I don't know, it just seems to me it's not trying to garner it. It's just, that's the raw truth. I chose a route that I always knew where it was leading, and I didn't care. And I didn't care what anybody thought about it. I actually enjoyed that lifestyle very much. And so you have to understand, come September 11th, you were probably talking to the most prideful person sitting in a cell, doing his time, just waiting to get out. And let's do this better next time. That was my mentality until I looked at the TV screen that morning. And I saw our country being attacked. And more importantly, it wasn't about the attack of the country, which was interesting. It was the response of the first responders. And that is what got me more than anything else. I just didn't know people operated that way. In all my life, I didn't even know they called them first responders. I didn't know cops ran into, I didn't know firefighters did that. I didn't know rescue. I didn't know people, I didn't know average everyday citizens help each other that way. I had never seen anything like that. Or maybe it just didn't enter into my frame of reference at the time. I don't know what it was, but I had like this education in people and how this is what matters. But I do know one thing is that when I saw those cops and I saw those firefighters pulling people out of burning buildings and all that, these are crumbling buildings. Everybody remembers that was alive that day. It's like, is it really crumbling? Those are Twin Towers. They're coming down. I just remembered the feeling even to this day. And to see people running into those buildings and hearing all the journalists talking and this, And to realize that those folks operate on something I don't have. And that was the thing that got me. They operate on purpose. They have to have a passion and a purpose behind their nobody just gives their life for somebody. There has to be, and I knew that wasn't me. I knew that I was completely alien. I was completely foreign to that. It's the first time I ever felt like I didn't deserve to sit in this country, to be able to know that I'm sitting in a cell, that no, it's not a great place. I'm in a cell 23 hours a day, 1 hour out, but I get 3 meals a day. I have a bed. It's not a perfect bed, but I'm comfortable. I mean, I have AC. I have everything. I have food on my shelf, and I can go to a chow. I mean, it just tripped me out to think that I'm complaining most of the time. And look at these people. The two worlds just didn't seem to match up. And at that moment, I just knew I would never, ever return back to this lifestyle. Not because I didn't want to be in a cell anymore. I just knew that I wanted what they had. Because that was what I wanted. That was the true thing I think I've always been looking for. I've just been going at it without purpose all my life. And I realized the importance of purpose that day. You know what I mean? And yeah, it's a day I will never forget. But it lit a fire inside of me. To watch people actually treating one another that way was just unbelievable. You know, and I think to myself today, would I give my life for another person, a complete stranger? Would I run into one of those buildings? Today, I hope I've evolved that far. But that is what is true living, you know.
Describe when we interviewed you previously for the Redemption podcast, you described what happened inside the cell, that moment when you dropped to your knees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the day. I still remember. It was the culmination of all the thousands of stories you heard that day. I just remember. I could probably go on and I could probably tell you 10, 15 stories just off the top of my head that I still remember that stay with me. But I just remembered falling to my knees as I didn't have anywhere else to go. It was the first time I'd ever prayed. I prayed without a priest, without a pastor, without just praying. Because I really didn't know what my next steps were. And I just knew you want to talk about shame. I was just so ashamed of myself. And I remembered saying to myself that day, I said, if I will live for you. I will do it. If you just teach me how. Those were my exact words. I just needed to know how to do it. You know?
Were you crying?
Yeah, I was curled up like a baby. I mean, that day was, I think it was the first time I'd actually cried. I didn't cry when I saw my new baby girl held in a courtroom when I just lost in trial. I didn't cry then. I didn't cry when I saw any of my children in visitation. It was interesting because pride had me. But that day I did. I think it was the first time I ever cracked down and actually cried. I mean, just wept, sobbing cries, you know, because I really didn't. It's a scary thing, Carey, when you're 28 years old at that time, and you're sitting in prison for the second time in your life, and you have absolutely no idea why you're actually there. It's like being dropped in the middle of the ocean and you're like, how did I get in this ocean? You know you committed crimes to get there. You just don't understand what were you in thinking to get here? It was just what was going on. It seemed like I don't know. It just seemed like it was like the fog had lifted, and it just all of a sudden you start realizing you're in this place, and your decisions got you here, but you just it's like, how did you get here? What drove you to this lifestyle to get you? This is even who you are, you know what I mean? And you start breaking down and taking apart all this stuff, and when you figure out you've created this image somehow, I had created this image that I wanted to be. And I despise this image that I fought for. This wasn't what was happening before 9/11. You have to understand that image was everything to me. You know what I mean? And now I don't have that image. Now where do you go? Now that you've taken all your clothes off, you're stripped naked. Where do you go now? It was the scariest moment of my life. You know, to know that there is absolutely no direction. You don't even know where to go next. I couldn't tell you on that moment. If they'd have let me out of prison, I wouldn't have known what to do. I mean, literally, I'd have been like, somebody would have to show me what's the next step. That's how lost I was.
How did you begin building back?
Well, a lot of time on my knees. I spent a lot of time in prayer. What was interesting enough, it was the first time I actually read a Bible. It was crazy. It was the first time I'd actually read the Bible. And I opened up this Bible that belonged to my cellmate, and he was out. He worked in a kitchen job, so he was out there always smelling like kitchen when he comes back to the cell. But he came back, and I remember he was gone, and I remember opening up, and it just said, I opened up the Bible, and it said, I go in to prepare a place for you. You know what I mean? And it was referring to Jesus in John, but he was talking about, go and prepare a place for you in my Father's house. There's many mansions, there's many rooms, and I go to make one of those rooms basically for you. And if I wouldn't have told you these things if it wasn't true. And I don't know why. I just started reading, and I started reading the Bible. I read the entire Gospel of John. I don't know, and I went ahead and just kept reading. Don't know why. I did. And it wasn't like I had received salvation that day or anything. I don't want to, turn it into a Billy Graham moment or anything. But it did start me on a path to start thinking that maybe God wants something for me. And God became very real in my life. And so I began, I really did. I started reading. I started looking for information. One thing I knew right away is that I had to re-educate myself. I knew that right away. I started changing even the things I'd watch on television, just everything. I knew that I got to cut this TV off and I got to start reading and start really understanding myself. I even started working. I worked even in the kitchen there. I started buying books. I wouldn't buy anything else. I'd buy books, psychological books, just things that would help me, anything. Because I didn't know who to go to. I didn't want to fall into the rut of just going to church and thinking that was going to fix it. Like this is like a
You wanted
hospital.
to do the hard work.
Yeah, that was exactly because I didn't know who to go to. I didn't know you can't just go to the prison psych. It's not like you just go. It doesn't work that way. And if you do go to the psych, it's like, what are you doing? Eating your feces or something? What's going on? It's like they're asking you different kind of questions. And I need, It's like what's going on? You cutting your wrist? It's always something extreme. So I didn't want to take up anyone's time from the psych who comes. But I knew that, one thing's for certain. Why don't you get to reading and why don't you start understanding? And I started journaling. I journal today. There's never a day I don't journal. So
for people who are listening or maybe watching this, what do you tell people about continuing on doing the hard work? Mm-hmm. Because I think that's a really important point to make because life can be very hard. And when we come to those crossroads, sometimes that's what takes us down, when it's just too hard. It feels too overwhelming. Your situation obviously is extreme because of your criminal activity and landing in prison and all of these things. But this can be applied to someone going through a divorce, death of a loved one, just being overwhelmed just in general. Man, what people have been going through with COVID, the mental health anguish that people have been suffering is going to go on. What do you tell people about doing the hard work, how you stay focused, how you stay right with yourself and right on your course?
Yeah, for me, I always try to share from a personal perspective. And I think that sometimes we downplay how important our stories are to one another. We're not so different in our stories sometimes. I'm from South Phoenix. I don't know where you're from. I don't know. It's just everybody's from someplace. But even in South Phoenix, I'm completely different from someone else that may live across the street from me, that could have lived. We still grew up in the same fields and this, that, and the other. And over here, you don't have that up in North Phoenix. You got parks and you have this, But the reality is it's like saying that because they're in North Phoenix and I'm in South Phoenix, they're much better off. Maybe affluently and maybe from a, materialistic standpoint. But the reality is folks up there have problems too. And what I come to discover is that we all connect in our pain. That's the one place. If you tell me that you won an award or if you have 1,000 plaques on your wall, that's cool. It's nice to look at, but I probably won't remember that next time. Unless, of course, you beat Michael Phelps in a swimming race. I probably remember that. Carey took down Michael Phelps. I remember that, right? You beat up Mike Tyson in his prime. I remember something like that. But I will always remember, if Carey shared with me, I remembered when I went through this and I didn't think I'd make it through. And I did. Mm-hmm. Because now I'm connecting with you in another way. I didn't even know she had problems. I didn't know, because sometimes I think in our pain, we think that we isolate ourselves and we think we're the only person that even understands that, or nobody understands. I am the primary caregiver for my mom, for instance, and sometimes,
your mom has Alzheimer's.
And she has Alzheimer's, dementia. She really is slipping. It's difficult sometimes because you get frustrated sometimes. There are times and you feel so much guilt. You want to talk about guilt because it's like, boy, I hope I didn't talk to her terse, or I hope I was patient enough right there. You do. There are moments like that. And you say to yourself, nobody understands. I just got to keep this to myself, because if I shared that openly with somebody, they would say, "Why, what a bad son. Wow, you should, that's your mom. She took care of you." And then you talk to somebody else who goes through the exact same thing. And it's like, wow, there's somebody else that understands. Mm-hmm. And I guess that for me, I think that one, I try to make sure that I'm transparent with people so that they can feel comfortable to share. Number one, get that off your shoulders. You're not by yourself. We all have problems in life. We have things, we have pains, we have struggles. You have them. Everybody has them.
Yeah.
We have things. Yes, maybe some people deal with them a little better, but is that really the best thing to do? We deal with them. And I think that we learn to just rush through things all the time. What I try to share with people at the end of the day is that this is all a process. The hard work is the most enjoyable work because you actually get to find out who you really are in this world. I know what my likes are. I know what my dislikes are because I do the hard work. I also know when I need to back off of situations. When I see that people are a little bit too frustrated or, hey, we need to take a break for a moment, because I don't want that person. I also know me. This person's very aggressive. I need to back off before they trigger my violence. I don't say that it's dead. I say that I have it under control. But to just keep listening to somebody, continually throwing insults at me or something, that's probably not good for me to keep listening to it all day long. It's like, okay, he's starting to trigger the fire. Now,
yes.
I need to remove myself.
So you've put boundaries in place in your life.
Yes.
That's really important.
Yes. You do the hard work because you find out who you really are. The greatest journey, and you know this, we all say it, we all have said it, we've heard it. The hardest journey and most rewarding journey is the journey within yourself, that journey to self-discovery. Things wear off after a while. You know what I mean? You can only buy so much stuff. You can only do so many things, but you're always with yourself. And so the reality is, I think that what I try to remind people also is that this process is never ending. There is no period in this. The period doesn't come until we're done with our assignment here. After that, that's God's business. But while we're here, this process is never ending. And I feel sorry for people who think they've gotten to the end of themselves. I mean, could you imagine really not discovering anything new about yourself? That would be kind of, wow. There's nothing else for me. That's it. You know what I mean? So I think that, for me, what I've come to discover in my life is that, being transparent with people so they can share, making sure that we create a comfortable and open environment where people feel comfortable sharing and there is no judgment. In my case, it's really easy because I've done so much horrendous, just stuff across the board that when it comes to forgiveness is a very small thing for me. It's like, man, I'm not worried about that. That is not a big deal to me. It's like, that's water off a duck's back. I'm not worried about that. Yeah. I'm more concerned that, we have a conversation about it than the forgiveness part, so what I try to do is make sure that people know that, it's okay also that we're not perfect. And I know it's so cliche to say that, but I feel like we live in this world of filters, especially today. It's like you can't even take a picture. There are people, you probably meet them as well. You go to business meetings sometimes. It's like, that is not what that person looks like on their social media at all. I have walked right past tables. I'm like, that is not him. That is not, I don't know if this has ever happened to you. I'm like, my God, that is not her. You know what I'm saying? Like, whoa, you know what I mean? And so I sit there, but it tells me a great deal that, wow, could you imagine? You think about it with your own children, your own daughter. If they live through this world of filters, if you saw them constantly correcting themselves in a filter, what does that really say about themselves? And I think about that in my own life. How many are you ever filtering? Those are the things that I journal down. I'm constantly trying to look at, hey, are these areas that you also struggle with, or in what areas? Because I feel like if one person struggles in this way, either I'm doing the same thing or probably it just looks a little different over here. But I do try to remind people to be extremely comfortable in their own skin. At the end of the day, when you strip everything away, it really is about the substance of the person's heart. That's what people really are attracted to. No matter who you are, you know what I mean? Who do you really want around you? People you can trust or people who look really good?
One of the things I find really intriguing about your story too is that you mentioned it a little earlier in the podcast that we're producing with you. You talk in depth about the abuse that you endured as a young child. And at one point, it was very emotional for you sharing that. I don't think you'd shared it a lot until that moment, some of those specific stories. But you definitely distinguish what you've gone through from what you did. So it seems like you don't blame your father, who was extremely abusive, for your behavior. Was that sort of freeing for you to take responsibility and not put the blame on his shoulders?
Yeah, absolutely. I look at responsibility as another one of those words you really have to take apart sometimes. So when I sat in a courtroom and I actually told the judge, I don't know, at whatever point I was standing in front of the judge for sentencing, oftentimes you'll hear, Your Honor, I take responsibility for my actions. But later on, I look back at that and I'm like, well, that's not really taking responsibility for your actions. You got caught. You know what I'm saying? So like, who else did it? I mean, this is you, Frantz. I mean, the evidence is all pointing at you. So, so it's not like, ooh, they just found out in the courtroom. It's like, I just unleashed this and let them know. But responsibility really is that, Carey, I stole something from your office. You don't know I stole this from you, but I need to bring this back to you. That's actually taking responsibility for your actions. It means that you never knew. You knew this thing was missing. You never in a million years would have thought it was Frantz Beasley, but Frantz Beasley came forward and said, Carey, I did this. I am now taking accountability for my actions, and I'm taking responsibility for those actions. There may be consequences for that. Carey might be saying, thank you. I was looking for that very valuable piece of equipment, and I'm calling the police. You very easily could do that. There's consequences to that. But the reality is responsibility comes when you step up to the plate without somebody catching you. That's responsibility. And one of the things that I saw in my process, I could not give that to my father, could not do it. My dad never taught me to be a thief. He never taught me to brutalize other people. And I could say psychologically, did this violence that I went through, is that what caused me to be this way and got me to be out of control in this? The reality is that would be a really easy out. But I the craziest thing my dad also gave me was this sense within yourself that when you do something, you did it. Now, that's just it. It's you did it. You own it. You own it. That's just the way it is. And I guess that's also something my father gave me. And I'll always be thankful for him giving that to me, because I'm not looking to point fingers at anybody. And it also, I feel that by me not taking responsibility for my actions, and by blaming it on my father, I also feel like in many respects, I disrespect people who come up in a world, because I know a lot of those folks, they come up in a world where it literally was forced on them. Crime was forced on them. They were raised in this. They were literally fed drugs. They didn't have parents around. Their neighborhoods are literally in gang territory. It's kind of like, I'm either in the gang or I'm fighting every day, so I might as well be in the gang. It's that kind of thing. And I didn't have that type of life. I chose crime. Crime didn't choose me. I look for these. I looked for this. As I said before, I'm not that average person that, hey, man, I always knew to put ing on the ends of words. I've always had a great comprehension. I went to good schools. I can sit here and blame this on a million things, but the reality is at the end of the day, what exactly does that get me at the end of the day? If I blame it on my father, sure, blame it on him. But what exactly does that get me? No, I had to set my father free as well. I can understand, and I share this also, is that one of the things that helped me was The Prince of Tides. It was the most therapeutic book for me that I've probably ever read. I mean, outside of many sections in the Bible, it is probably one of the most therapeutic books for me, dealing with a very overbearing father. And I just remember the very, very intro to that book where it says that the narrator said that I had to forgive my parents, because I realized they too had a history. And at that moment, it helped me to, when I read those words, I said, wow, how powerful is that? It's basically saying that my dad got to be that way somehow too. What was his upbringing like? I learned more about my dad after his death than while he was alive. It was crazy. People telling me stories, things like that. I understood all. I was like, that's probably why he was that way. And that's why he was that way. And that's, you start to understand, cultural difference, history, it just all sorts of things popped up. But I understood that what world did my dad grow up in? My dad was born in 1934. What was it like for a black man in 1934? You know what I mean? I think about all these things. Why is he so strict? Why is he so this? Why is he so that? You start to realize little by little, maybe there's a reason. Maybe when you look back and you peel that onion back, you start seeing how the sausage is actually made sometimes, and you start realizing maybe I can forgive that aspect of my life. But as far as this, my dad never put a gun in my hand and said, you got to go to work and this is how you do it. That wasn't the direction. My dad always wanted me to go to college, wanted me to be a lawyer. There's a lot of things. No, I don't think he had the emotional tools to show me how to get there. Nor the ability to listen. But there's a lot of things he didn't have. But I also know what he wanted out of my life. And so, to take away would be a disrespect. It would also make me disingenuous. There's a lot of things it would make me. But one thing that I've learned is that you don't get anywhere by trying to blame shift. If you did something, you did it. Own it. It's going to be all right. So today when in prison, I decided something. When I mess up, I'm going to own it. But when I do well, I'm going to own it. It's just the way it is. And that's the way I am today. I messed up. I'm not running anywhere. I did that. If I didn't, that's something else. But the reality is I did that. And it's actually quite liberating to live in truth. I don't have to make up another story. I don't have to constantly keep coming up with new things. And that's what happens when you're disingenuous, when you're lying, when you're doing it. It's just, man, it's easier for me to tell you the truth now.
Deception is an exhausting
yes,
place to be.
Yeah, constantly.
So tell me about your life today.
Yeah.
And I'm so excited for people to hear this podcast because it really is incredible. Nick, our producer, and I are just so thrilled to bring your story because one of the things you always say is that it is possible to see yourself in a new light. Yeah. And that was what struck me in your Facebook blogs that I started reading. So tell people about what you're doing today and the importance of inspiring others with your true story.
Yeah, I actually have fun actually working with people getting out of prisons and jails, both youth and adults. And providing services for them. And I guess in some ways, just being able to show them that they can do this. This is one of them. It's one of the things prior to COVID. It was the COVID pandemic, going into prisons and actually being able to share people. You see hope, and hope is extremely important for people to be able to. Hey, if this guy can do it, I can do it too. And I try to make sure that they understand that in the most simplistic aspect, that the hard work is not. You will make money. You're going to do all sorts of things. There's people that do wonderful things out here that have been to prison. They're millionaires today, doing great. Yet they were stuck on drugs. They were doing, and what happens when you live a life of sobriety and just, you can think clearly, and you never know. A lot of folks have never even had a chance to even see what they can accomplish. They've never even known that they could do certain things, and I also teach them about the importance of having a healthy environment around them, a healthy community, healthy friends around them. But more importantly, I enjoy also working with youth. I love working with kids in schools, especially in schools that don't have as much, that they're lacking. They're in high crime areas, high drugs, everything you can think of. Those schools are in those areas. I love going in and speaking with those kids. I love going in and working with those kids. I love being able to start off with a group that, I don't know, there's 40 kids in my class. They're all getting ready to get kicked out of a class, getting ready to get kicked out of school, and 36 of them graduate. They promote. And that means so much to me to be able to see. And oftentimes those kids will say, Mr. Beasley, you know why we listen to you? I'm like, why do you listen to me? Because you're nice to us. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, go easy on your teachers, guys, because y'all are just terrible kids. I'm just playing. I don't tell them that. But it is, these teachers go through so much sometimes, so you sit there. And, so I couldn't do it. I could do it once a week, and that's it. Outside of that, I'm certain I'd be back in prison again. Those kids, God bless those teachers. But the reality is, I love working with those kids. I love being able to because I know that sometimes you have to have an outlet. And I understand also that those kids, sometimes this is the only place they can act up. It's a structured environment. They have people listening to them. And they also know they're not going to get beaten or they're going to get left behind. I know a lot of times what these kids are dealing with. And I know why sometimes they're acting out. So being able to work with some of these young people is so rewarding. And I also love a great deal of what I do is, especially now that we're starting to come out, I believe, of this pandemic, hopefully, is getting back to actually bringing awareness to sex trafficking. I have just being able to making sure that we're making the public aware of what's happening and making sure that we're being proactive in regards to our own children and our just the way we get tricked into things all the time. I just not just children anymore. I just see people with dating apps, all these different things going on. And I'm just like, just want people to be aware, and I guess because I've been on the other side, not of course of sex trafficking, but I've seen so many different things because I was involved in that lifestyle. It's just, it really does cause me to have this, I don't know, today I have this perspective of, I want everyone safe and I want people thinking smart. I want them to be proactive about life and about their own safety. And I guess I'm just that type of person. I walk into Circle K's today sometime. I get my receipt or get a water or something. And I'm like, the guy's counting cash from the safe down there. And I want to say so badly, I want to tap him on his forehead. Don't do that. You know what I'm saying? It's a really bad decision. I go into restaurants sometimes. I can point out things that people are doing wrong. And I so badly just want to say, that's no, you're being inconsistent there. I bet you weren't trained to do that. I just want to, this is, my mind still operates, but it's different now. It's on the flip side of this. I want to tell people that's not the way you should do that.
You are a constant source of wanting to help people now. Does it ever get exhausting? And people ask me this question because I feel like you and I are sort of kindred souls, that I feel the same way about journalism. I will continue to tell these stories until I can no longer effectively do it. And no matter how sad the story is, no matter how personally exhausting it is, it means something to me. And I feel like you are the same.
Yeah. And what I've been doing, journaling helps me a lot. I do. Don't get me wrong. I do fall into a lot of dark spots sometimes. We lost a lot of people over the last few years due to drug abuse, just overdosing. And then the COVID pandemic really took a toll on many of our students. That was hard to take in. Lost a lot of old colleagues, old comrades from the past also, who just couldn't leave a life alone. So that was probably, the last few years has probably been the most difficult on me emotionally and mentally and spiritually. It was I went through, but it was interesting. Every once in a while, I would have someone reach out to me just out of the blue. And sometimes I think that's just God tapping me on the shoulder. They would just say, "Hey, you doing? Just checking on you," and this, that, and the other. And that means a lot to me. I think in this world, if you can have a few people, just a handful that check in on you from time to time and make sure you're okay. Just randomly checking in on you just to make sure. You really need to appreciate those people. And lately, I've had to do that with a few of my old relationships, making sure, even a few of them I hadn't talked to in years. I just went over and texted them and said, "Hey, just want to I really appreciate you checking in on me." I said, "You're probably surprised I'm even reaching out." They're like, "Yeah, but it's great hearing from you." You know what I mean? But I remembered when they went through a certain time with me, because this work it can become very draining sometimes. I am driven by it though, and I feel like I'm always looking for that next step, to be able to help and to be able to, I just like to see people doing well.
When you say that you were in your darkest spot, what did that mean for you? I mean, do you ever worry that you would go back to a previous life, your previous, criminal life, or is that, drugs and alcohol, or what does that darkness potentially lead to that scares you?
No depression. I mean, just slipping into more of a depressive state. Never would go back to crime. I mean, that part's just dead in me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just, I don't even know if I want to pick a fight with anybody anymore. I mean, I don't even know if I have the, you had to keep egging me on to keep doing something, you know what I mean? So, and then I'd probably say, "Man, let's just say you won and we're just leave it alone." Yeah. Okay, how about that? You won. Okay, yeah, great. So, but no, I think more falling into a depressive state, just fighting. Sometimes, other people's, all that negative energy that you're helping other people to get away from, sometimes I feel can leapfrog onto you if you're not careful and checking yourself. And that was something I had to learn, that especially when you're working, the hustle and bustle, everything else.
That darkness, you do what to make sure that you can get out of that?
One, the journaling. The other thing that I started noticing is that over the last few, I had actually let my health go a little bit. And so making sure that I'm taking care of myself, because sometimes you're giving so much, you almost forget about yourself sometimes, that, hey, your health really is your wealth, and that's your mind, body, spirit. You got to take care of yourself. And so making sure, taking time out and making sure that you have to make yourself the priority also.
And so what sort of things do you do for your health?
Well, one, making sure that I'm eating well. I'm very well, getting off the sugars. I mean, just all sorts of things, lots of water. I make sure on that, eating at home instead of eating out so much. I mean, I'll do a lunch sometimes, but out with friends every once in a while. But the main thing is cooking at home and making sure that I'm eating healthy, making sure that I'm making certain that I'm actually on a good little cardio workout, just getting time to take care of you. And also taking into consideration, what are things you actually enjoy? I love hiking Sedona. Make sure you get up there. It's 2 hours away. Go up there, hike, come on back down. Do you know how much that does for me? I mean, just making sure that I'm also spoiling myself every once in a while, as opposed to always putting out the energy. It's those simple things. Sometimes I'll just grab a park. I'll go walk the park. My friends aren't interested in going very often, but that's okay. They don't have to go. Yeah. It's just really about getting into my own head, being able to free my thoughts, listen to a little music, just being able to let it go for a while, and also setting parameters and boundaries around my own schedule. I get up early and I go to bed late. Well, no, now I go to bed earlier, and I make sure that also when I'm walking or I'm hiking, there's no more business on a hike. I leave Phoenix if I'm in Sedona. If I'm at the beach, I'm there. Cut the phone off. Stop with all that. If it's not an emergency, what is the big deal? And if it was an emergency, I'm too far away anyway to do anything. So
you're making such an important point that I was saying this to someone yesterday, that we sometimes forget to just have joyful moments. When you're rushing and then you're stressed and your mind's already going to the next thing, it's like I was at Trader Joe's. I ran into someone and I just started chatting with him. I hadn't seen him in a while. And one part of my brain's like, I got to go because I'm kind of on a schedule. And then I let that part go. And I just sat there in the produce aisle just chatting for like 25 minutes. And you know what? It was fun. Sure. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I left there and I was kind of like, it's Sunday. Mm-hmm. What am I in such a rush? Right. So I think you make such an important point. Mm-hmm. As we wrap things up, I wanted you to leave the audience with a couple of words of inspiration. And what do you want your story to say?
At this moment, because I like it's ever evolving, is that never put a period where there's supposed to be a comma. And also always remember that you may think that sometimes you think it always get worse, and it will sometimes. But the reality is that your attitude and your outlook on life really does change. Don't ever let your thoughts get to a dark place. Always force them to turn back around, because you'd be quite surprised if you there is an old saying that if you can see what happens when you keep putting yourself down, you can see how far down you basically can spiral down. Imagine what could happen if you start encouraging yourself and start speaking positively to yourself. And I just believe that you sometimes have to force yourself through it. You have to take a time out. You got to backstep and you got to push forward. But there are too many individuals in this world that put periods where there should be commas. They don't even know. Like I said, to answer that question, I'm at one part. I'm at this chapter. I'm at this page. I'm on this line of this book, and I don't even know how long the book is. I just want to make sure that I'm living a proper, healthy lifestyle. Because the healthier I feel like I don't know, the healthier I am, I just want everybody healthy around me. And I think that's the importance of really making sure you're the priority, and your health in every way is the priority. It's just natural. You want it for everybody else. Have you ever seen an unhealthy person? Well, of course they're going to give you everything unhealthy. You know what I mean? But have you ever noticed healthy people? You're probably all healthy. It's just, no, I mean, why are you eating that? Stop doing that. Why are you drinking that? So it's just, you just want them. Hey man, drink a water instead. You start thinking about it. Hey, did you bring healthy snacks instead of just this? You want everybody living a healthy lifestyle. You want the best for everybody. And so I guess at the end of the day, I think that people need to focus on their health, mind, body, spirit. They have to focus on their health and making sure they're in a good space, taking time every morning. Also, don't forget, before you go to bed, I challenge people, write down 5 things that you're grateful for today. Every night before you go to bed, what are 5 things that you're grateful for? You know what I mean? I promise you it'll change your whole outlook every day.
Frantz, thank you so much. And thanks for letting us be a part of a couple of chapters in your book. You're still writing that book, sure. But I'm glad to be a part of it. And we will be sharing out your podcast, Redemption with Frantz Beasley. And where can people find more about your work at AZ Common Ground? www.arizonacommonground.org, or they can go to our Facebook at AZ Common Ground, Facebook /Facebook. All right. Thank you so much, Frantz. And he does some amazing Facebooking. Is that an official word? Facebooking?
You could coin it.
I just put the ing at the end. Yeah. Thanks for listening, everyone. I'm Carey Pena. Take good care. And remember to watch out for one another.